Counterpoint, the story of the Baroque Orchestra, hosted by Percival Peckinshaw IV.
Good evening. As previously stated, I am Percival Peckinshaw IV. Tonight, I am inviting you to join me on a magical trip back in time to witness the growth and evolution of the Baroque Orchestra into the one we know today. The Baroque Orchestra, the first real orchestra, came about in the late 1600s. It was an exciting time. Instrumental music was becoming as popular as vocal music. Improvisation was becoming more popular, and the music world was in love with thematic variations and basso continuo. Equal-tempered tuning was becoming more widespread, and eventually took over completely. So that's how things were, but soon they would be different thanks to a Frenchman named Jean-Baptiste Lully. He was the real mastermind behind the Baroque Orchestra. It all started with his ensemble called 24 Violons du Roi, which was presumably 24 violins that belonged to someone named Roy. He started adding all kinds of crazy new instruments like the transverse flute and the hautbois. Pretty soon, his wacky additions spread across Europe until they became a standard, and that's how the Baroque Orchestra was born. But the things happening didn't stop there. Dear me, no, if you think that's where it ended, then you're wrong. Initially, strings were considered the most important instruments in the group, and so they got all the interesting parts. The brass and woodwind instruments were stuck with all the boring bits like the harmonies and bass parts. Blech. But by the end of the century, the brass and woodwind section was all grown up, and started getting important parts too. But the string section also expanded, so it was a bittersweet victory for the wind section. Meanwhile, the oboes were finding that more and more the flute was sneaking into their parts, until eventually it was considered their equal. The flute often doubled the oboe parts an octave higher. The oboes and bassoons started finding themselves being relegated to sustaining harmony with the horns. The flute had become more prominent than them. However, there was nothing they could do about it because that's how things happened. They did have some solace in the fact that they were now prominent solo instruments in a way they'd never been before. Along with modern-day elements like strings and woodwinds, the Baroque orchestra still had some older instruments like the harpsichord. Compared to the modern orchestra, it was also fairly small, with a maximum of only 30 people. Elsewhere in the orchestra, a new instrument called the clarinet was making waves. It became very popular, especially as a solo instrument. It was found to be a better match for the horns than oboes, so it took even more of their parts. And speaking of injustice, we all know that the percussion section is superior to the rest of the orchestra, but lamentably the only percussion instrument used in those days was the timpani. And even that was used sparingly. Although orchestras have changed quite a lot since the Baroque era, there are still some orchestras that use old-fashioned Baroque instruments and Baroque techniques to play Baroque music. These orchestras are called Baroque orchestras, although I have no idea where they came up with such a ridiculous name. I hope you have enjoyed this special presentation, and I also hope that Aaron gets 100%. Have a good holiday, Mr. Greaves.